last but not least, Mr. Ric Crossman.
Ben. Can you move that bottle of wine?
Right, before we go any further, James is right to feel trepidation. Partially because I'm going to humiliate him. Mainly the speech writing is hard, and it's hard in the best of circumstances, but when you're standing up in the middle of a day that you desperately hope is going to be the finest day in the lives of two of your closest friends, it actually gets a lot harder. So I actually canvassed some opinion, I asked for some advice on how to give a speech. James told me that above all the speech should be funny. Lynda said that above all the speech should be short. I've also been told to make absolutely sure I remember the bride's name, which I think I've already done. I'm also under orders not to swear too much or to move any items in my clothing. Ladies and gentlemen, the only thing I can guarantee is short. Speaking of items of clothing, though, I thought this would be a good time to mention my first strong memory of James. Now, this happens. It's not as bad as you think. There are those memories, but you're going to have to ask me in the bar. We were walking down for our matriculation ceremony. This was 11 years ago, as James has said. We were walking down from Van Mildert College to the cathedral for our matriculation. And we were walking together, and I happened to mention that under the suit I had been forced to wear for the occasion, I was actually proudly displaying my Simpsons t-shirt. Now, given James's encyclopedic and some would say freakish knowledge of early 90s Simpsons episodes, this allowed us to bond very, very quickly. If he had known that I was wearing a pair of GoBots boxer shorts, our friendship would have gone very, very differently. And by the way, if you didn't get that joke, ask somebody born in the 80s.
We know the GoBots.
That's how our friendship began. But it very, very quickly grew stronger. We discovered that we shared very, very similar interests. We both have the same sort of twisted sense of humour. And we both share, well, not exactly a love for maths, but the strong desire to create maths in exchange for money, so that neither of us ever have to get a real job. The final foundation of our friendship was built on an agreement under which James would be allowed to borrow any one of my massive collection of music CDs at any time he wanted, and in exchange, I could hang out with him and take advantage of the massive group of women that always seemed to appear whenever he was outside. Or he was inside but had a window open. So our friendship grew, as I say. We had many, many adventures, none of which Lynda will let me tell you about him. But eventually he came to me and told me that tragically he was moving from Durham to St Andrews, where he was going to study the properties of the sun. Now, I was obviously very, very sad to see him go, but at the same time I was delighted that he'd chosen a job that had set him on the path to becoming a supervillain. If he had met Lynda and got all distracted, he would absolutely be living in a volcano. Calling himself Professor Apocalypse and surrounded by men in jumpsuits driving those little cars you see. But he did meet Lynda at St Andrews, which of course I guess is where the story of today truly begins. Now, those of you who have met James will know that he's a frighteningly intelligent man. He is very, very, very smart. He's certainly an awful lot smarter than I am. And one of the things about spending so much of your time with a best friend who is much, much smarter than you is you gain an awful lot of pleasure in telling the stories in which he comes across as an abject idiot. So, when I first went up to visit James in St Andrews, the two of us were both single, which meant that I thought, awesome, this is a perfect opportunity to experience what I believe I've already described as the McLaughlin spontaneous lady crowd generation. And it was during my first observation of this phenomenon whilst in the St Andrews student bar that I met Lynda for the first time. Now, I'd never actually gotten around to asking Lynda whether it was obvious to her at that point that she and James would make a perfect couple, but I have to say it was an obvious no-brainer for me. So, the next day, after James's hangover had receded somewhat, I took him for a walk along the beach at St Andrews, and I suggested, with all of the tact and subtlety for which I'm renowned, that he might like to think about taking the fair Miss Freude, as she was then, to dip. And James sort of stopped and looked out at the sea and thought for a little while, and then he went, I don't really know if it would work. She's the best friend I have here. Like I said, the man's here. But those of you who've met James will know that there is no way you can talk him into or out of anything. So I thought I'll let the matter slide. I'll see what happens. Maybe the pieces of the puzzle will fall into place. And sure enough, the next time I came up to St Andrews, James quietly took me aside and said, since the last time you were here, Lynda and I have become active. He could have told me that since the last time he'd been there, it had rained in Scotland. And I would have been more surprised. However, not being surprised is not the same thing as not being delighted. Okay? Now, I am not suggesting that everybody should marry their best friend. I would find it very difficult to have married my best friend before today. And at this point, it would pretty much require he turned out to be a bigamist with a taste of beer. But what is very clear is that the arrangement works very, very well for James, and it works very, very well for me. The only thing in this world more pleasurable than watching a dear friend get married is watching two dear friends get married to each other and then buying you all of your booze. So, with that in mind, I'd like to stand. If you have full glasses, raise them. If you have empty glasses, try and fill them and then raise them. And if you have empty glasses and you've already drunk all of the wine, then I guess just lick the insides and then ladies and gentlemen, to Lynda and James.
Lynda and James.
I'm contractually obligated to remind you that there is coffee available outside this room as soon as I'm finished speaking, which I have done